Greetings. Welcome to another live broadcast of Road to Emmaus. This is going to be an interesting topic that I wanted to cover today, mainly because I think that this is very important when we talk about how we look into the scriptures and we glean from the scriptures and we get an understanding of why we believe what we believe and a lot of it has to do with how we intend to interpret scriptures. So I thought that this would be a good and exciting time, and what I think is exciting, and what I got planned is to talk about the curious case of the logos. And the reason why I call it the curious case of the logos is because one, it's one of the most interesting subjects for me when we talk about the person and the work of Jesus Christ and the fact that he is eternal. And so I think that it would just be important to, to really dig into his eternality and showcase why we believe that he's eternal and why is it that worshiping Jesus is not considered idolatry, but that it is the means by which we honor the God who created the heavens and the earth. So this again is called the Curious Case of the Logos. Just wanted to get started. Um, if you follow me to John chapter 1, verses 1 to 3, and this is going to just basically kick off our understanding of the Logos. So John chapter 1, 1 to 3, um, and I have it here on the screen. It says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning, or another translation will say, He was in the beginning with God. And then it goes on to say that all things came into being through Him, or through Him all things were made, and without Him nothing was made that has been made. So when we read this passage, we immediately notice some things. One, it says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And I just wanted to look at it. So let's quickly explore the similarities and the differences. Um, we see that in Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, it says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Whereas in John chapter 1, it says that in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. So we see here in examination, both Genesis 1 and John 1 1 have the phrase in the beginning. What does that mean to you? What image comes to mind? In the Greek, the phrase in the beginning is, let me see if I can find it here. Uh, I can't pull that up just yet. But in the Greek, the phrase in the beginning is in arche, and that's the Greek word. That Greek word arche speaks of the principal cause or the source or the head or the root of things that exist. For us human beings, this is a hard thing to conceive because we are finite, and so thinking of the beginning requires more than we can offer. As we continue to move along, we also notice a slight difference, but a connection between John 1 and Genesis 1 1, who was present in both passages. In Genesis 1 1, we see the word God. In John 1 1, the author says the word. The writer, whose name is John or Yohanan in Hebrew, brings into view the word as the subject, whereas John chapter 1, verse 1, God is the subject. So we're going to revisit this later, but let's quickly go back to the word. The word is the English translation of the Greek logos. Because the New Testament was written primarily in Greek, it would be important to visit the ideas that a Greek speaking audience would have envisioned. The logos, sorry, just trying to get my bearings. Um, the logos is a in a purely Greek-centered thought would bring about a couple of philosophical perspectives. Of the various approaches or various perspectives, there's two perspectives that would have risen to prominence, and these are the two perspectives. One, the logos as is the or as the universal intelligence that determines, or sorry, that reveals the divine thought to humanity. So the logos is as the universal intelligence that reveals the divine thought to humanity. Number two is the rational principle that maintains the order of all things seen and unseen. In other words, the logos is the means by which the universe is governed. Logos is logos in a way represents divine order and power. The ancient Greeks placed a high value on intellect and reason as the ultimate aspiration behind the natural order, and therefore the logos was the principal designer of the cosmic and the natural system. So as we move forward from a Heraclitus and pre-Stoic view of logos, these are Greek philosophies, keep in mind that these are Greek philosophies, Greek thoughts behind logos. So if we move from a Heraclitus and pre-Stoic view of logos to a mid-Platonic direction, the logos became seen as the mind of God. In the beginning was the word. Well, what's the word? Well, the writer. I'm trying to go to my next slide. Um, the writer of John's Gospel, who is John the Apostle, or Yohanan, the son of Benedict, son of Zebedee, so Yohanan ben Zebedee, he uses the Greek language. He would first and foremost he would likely not appeal to Greek or Hellenistic or a Greek or a Hellenistic framework to define things that are dear to the Jewish culture. Even though there are some overlaps between concepts, Yohanan ben Zebedee is using the Greek language to communicate Jewish thought. As a Jew, his frame of reference would be the Hebrew scriptures as well as the Aramaic targums that existed during his time. In Greek thought, the logos is the impersonal, unseen reality that we would experience through rationality and intellectual discourse. In the Jewish tradition, the logos or memra, which is the Aramaic equivalent term for logos, was the visible intermediary agent between God and the created world. The writer of John went further by connecting and identifying the logos, that is the word, as being sentient and personally present during the creation of the universe. The writer referenced the Tanakh, that is the Old Testament, to confirm the concept of the word. Here's a passage in Psalm 33, verse 6. This is Psalm 33, verse 6. And it says, by the word of Yahweh, that is Yud He Vav He, by the word of Yahweh, or by the word of the Lord, the heavens were made, and by the breath of his mouth, all their hosts. That is Psalm 36, 33, verse 6. By the word of Yahweh, the heavens were made, and by the breath of his mouth, all their hosts. The Jews of the Second Temple period who returned from exile primarily spoke in the Aramaic tongue. Because Hebrew was not as common. Jews outside of Israel mainly spoke Greek. This largely contributed to the reason behind the development of the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Old Testament in the Aramaic Targums. So what largely contributed to the creation of the Septuagint was one, a political approach and more of a way for the Hellenistic community, or Ptolemy, who was actually the reigning emperor at that time over the known world. He wanted to basically get a handle and an understanding of what the Jews believed, and so he commissioned 70 to 72, or had commissioned 70 to 72 Jewish, what you want to call it, rabbis, or just highly educated Jews, scholars, what have you, to basically translate the Old Testament from Hebrew to Greek. And that's how we get the Septuagint. Septuagint just simply means the 70. Uh, but along with that, you had Jews that were in Israel who had a preference of not necessarily speaking Greek, but still holding on to their mother tongue in some way, shape, or form. And they wanted to, and again, since the mother tongue of Hebrews was largely lost, they wanted to be able to understand the scriptures, or to be able to interpret the scriptures from a Hebraic perspective. And so the Aramaic Targums were developed as commentaries to help the Jewish audience be able to understand the writings of their forefathers. So the Targums worked as Aramaic translations and commentaries of the Hebrew Old Testament, which helps us to understand how the Jewish community during the Second Temple era understood the Old Testament. What the author is intending to do, that is, what is John the Apostle is attempting to do, is to draw a link between the Word and God. Since Genesis is the first book of the entire Bible, I think it would be important to first talk about God. So now that we have that background, let's go to the text, which, according to the text, in the beginning, was the Word, right? So what are we seeing here? Um, and so we just look at it purely in the Greek. And in the Greek, we have this is what we consider, what we tend to do a lot of times is that when we're doing interpretations, we like to break things down into clauses. So in John chapter 1, verse 1, in the first verse of John chapter 1, we have what you call three clauses. Each clause is distinct or separated from the other by the use of a comma. So in the very first clause, we have in arche ein hologos, or NRK hey, NRK ein hologos, and so let's just simply do a breakdown of this particular clause, right? So ein, which you see is the first word, is a primary is a preposition of a primary position, indicating location. Uh, that's simply what it is. It's just a locational. It's a locationary or a locational preposition. Uh, in, right, and the next word is arche, which in Greek is translated to beginning or origin or the initial starting point, um, which is followed by which is followed by ain, which is an imperfect indicative active Greek verb of the word aimi, meaning to be or existence. Now, here's what's interesting. When you see the imperfect tense, which is the third word here, so the first word is ain, the second word is arche, the third word is ain, right? Um, Ain comes from the root word in the Greek "ami," simply meaning existence, or as I have it here, I exist. it is indicating that something it's a first. Let me just talk about the tense. I'm all over the place right now. The imperfect tense is speaking of an occurrence that takes place in the past and continues. So in this case, because the verb is Amy, which means I exist, it is indicating that something existed before the preceding words, which is in RK, or in the beginning. So look at it like this: if today is the beginning, then what do you call yesterday? Let me ask it again. If today is the beginning, then what do you call yesterday? Simply put, before the beginning. So the beginning, so the beginning, so in the beginning, something existed, or before the beginning, something existed. What existed? Look at the following words: hologos. I'm going back to that slide. Hologos, right? In RK, ain't hologos. Before the beginning, right? Before the location of the beginning, the logos existed. The word existed, right? That's simply what is there. What is existed? What existed before the beginning? The logos. So let's put it together now. Let's put it together now that so we did a simple quick breakdown of that first clause in the Greek. Let's put it together now and see what we have. Simply it says that at the beginning, or at the location before the beginning, the word existed. That's simply a rough translation. That's how we get in the beginning was the word. It's simply just saying another way of saying that is that at the beginning, at the location before the beginning, the word existed. That's simply what it's trying to communicate. You may say, well, if we have it in the English, why do I need to go back through this, or why do I need to reinterpret it this way? Well, simply I'm just trying to bring out what the English is communicating based on a literal reading of it in the actual Greek. And depending on who you talk to, there may be another way of saying this or another way that it can be translated. But all in all, it comes down to this: that at the location before the beginning, the word existed. Now, so now let's go to the next clause, right? So we go to the next clause. And the next clause is the next clause is kai hologos ain proston theon. Kai hologos ain proston theon. Here is, and this is simply where it translates, and the word was with God. In our English Bibles, we have and the word was with God. Here's where it gets very interesting. We have the first word kai, which is translated and and is a what we call a conjunction. In other words, it's connecting what follows to what was before. So um, so as a conjunction, it's basically connecting this verse to the previous verse. This brings the word or the logos back in view, followed by ain, which is again that imperfect indicative active of the Greek verb aimi, meaning to be or remember, exist, which we saw in the preceding verse, showing that this is something that took place in the eternal, followed by the Greek word pros. So we have kai hologos ain, something that is taking place in the eternal, or the fact that the logos existed in the eternal, and is followed by the Greek word pros. Pros Pros is a directional preposition, um, which is better translated as toward or to. So there's an action that is taking place. So there's an action that is taking place in the eternal before the beginning, in which the logos continually existed, toward or facing something. Facing implies personality or personhood. The next word is thon theon, which is literally the God. The definite article thon indicates that God here is specific, personal, and is the receiver of action between the Jews believed. I'm sorry. It is the receiver of action because the Jews believed in a personal God. There is no other God, and I want to make sure that that's absolutely clear, right? There is no other God, but the God of Israel. And his name is Yahweh. He calls himself Yahweh. Yod-Heh, Vav-Heh. It's the four Hebrew consonants that we call the tetragrammaton. In other words, the four letters. Yod-Heh, Vav-Heh. And it's pronounced, to the best of our understanding, as Yahweh, right? The one, and so Yahweh simply means the one who exists and cannot be defined, or cannot be defined by existence. In other words, we as creatures, as his creation, as ones who've been brought into existence, there's no way to define him. He is the one who exists and cannot be defined by existence, and yet brings things, or all things, into existence. This brings us back to John 1:1, right? The writer of the Gospel of John is speaking of Yahweh as the only true and living God. Yahweh and God are interchangeable in the mind of the writer. There's no other God that comes to mind. He is not. He is not. John. John the apostle is not seeking to convey a story about the different gods that the Gentiles worship. No, the writer does not present Yahweh as an equal partner among a pantheon. No, the gospel writer is a Torah observant Jew who affirms the Shema, which states, "Hear Israel, Yahweh our God, Yahweh is one," or Shema Israel, Yahweh Eloheinu, Yahweh Echad, and you may hear it in English as "Listen, Israel, or hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one." So that's what the concept is bringing. Is bringing about the passage of Deuteronomy 6:4, the Shema, is indicating that there's the loyalty and there's fidelity to only one God, and that one God is Yahweh and Yahweh alone. There's no one else. There's nobody else. So therefore, Yochanan is not contradicting himself, and he will not contradict the most central aspect of his faith, demanding uncompromising allegiance to Yahweh and Yahweh alone. So the God in John chapter 1:1b clause is Yahweh, and is distinct, and is a distinct subject or an object from the word. The facing toward is denoting a relationship between the subjects, the word, and the God who is Yahweh. Isn't that beautiful? Isn't that remarkable that there is no God but Yahweh? And yet we see here in John chapter 1, in John chapter 1:1, B clause, that the word existed with Yahweh in the beginning. It gets better. Or should I say it gets gooder? Um, Try to get my bearings so that I'm able to kind of follow along with the notes that I have. So basically, so let's just simply just quickly put this all together, right? And we're going to put this together with the first clause. So we're going to do the first clause, and then we're going to now add the second clause. So so John 1:1a followed by John 1:1b clause, and we're going to put it together. And it's simply this: at the location before the beginning, the word existed, and the word existed before the beginning, facing toward Yahweh. Again, this is a literal This is to me breaking down the Greek and just giving my best approach to a literal understanding of what the Greek is communicating. And it's not, again, it's not as good as what the translator's done, but this is just simply my way or my approach to translating what is there based on based on how I break down the Greek. So basically, at the location before the beginning, the word existed, and the word existed before the beginning, facing toward Yahweh. That's basically the idea. So in the beginning was the word, and the word was with God. In the beginning was the word, and the word was with God, or at the location before the beginning, the word existed, and the word existed before the beginning, facing toward Yahweh. Isn't that beautiful? And so now we look at the last clause, right? This is clause C. This is the last clause of John 1:1. And this clause simply says, Kai theos and hologos. Kai theos and hologos. Again, we have another conjunction, Kai, right? Kai, or what looks like Kai. It connects again, which connects to the previous clauses in which the word is the subject. Therefore, the correct order is, and the word was God, right? A lot of people have tried to make a debate out of this by saying, well, it should be interpreted, and God was the word. But no, the subject is the word. The subject is the logos. In the first clause, the subject is the logos. The second clause, the subject is the logos. Therefore, in connection to the second clause, using the word kai, which is a conjunction, and it emphasizes the logos again as the subject, and the logos was God. So, and here's my literal interpretation. And the word continually existed as God, or the word is God. So how do we put that all together? Did I even put that all together? No, I didn't. I didn't do that. But hey, at the location, before the beginning, the word existed, and the word existed before the beginning, facing toward Yahweh, and the word continually existed as God, or the word continually existed as Yahweh. What is pretty interesting is that in this particular third clause, right, you notice that we do not have a definite article before theos, right? Um, but before we get there, we just wanted you to know that, after the word of logos, we have our favorite friend ain, which again is an imperfect indicative active of the Greek verb ami, meaning to be or exist. Theos in this clause does not have a definite article, which indicates not a personality, but a quality of existence, or a quality or a qualitative designation of being. Simply put, and the word continually existed as God. The word was God, or continually existed as God. Remember, we are reading John 1:1, John chapter 1, verses 1 to 3, with Genesis 1 in view. The second verse of John 1, of John 1:1. I'm sorry, yeah, the second verse of John chapter 1 summarizes the first verse of John chapter 1. And it says, Althos ain arche proston theon, right? And what is that simply saying? I'm going to go fast. It's saying pretty much he, speaking of the word ain, the imperfect, remember the imperfect indicative active verb of ami, meaning to be or exist, followed by NRK, which is in the beginning, pros, which is the directional preposition meaning toward, theon, the God. In other words, he continually existed before the beginning, facing toward the God, or Yahweh. So it's basically a repeat of, or a summary of, John chapter 1, verse 1. That's what John chapter 1, verse 2 is simply saying. He was with God in the beginning. That's all it is. Or he was in the beginning with God. Simply, that's all it is. He continually existed before the beginning, facing towards God or Yahweh. And that's extremely beautiful. Just seeing how all this connects, right? And then in John chapter 1, verse 3, John chapter 1, verse 3, it says, all things came into being through him, and apart from him, nothing came into being that has come into being. There are two things, and maybe three, that I want you to take notice of. Um, in John chapter 1 through in John chapter 1 verse 3, it presents the word who existed as God in John chapter 1:1 as the creator of all things. In other words, it presents the word who existed as God in John 1:1 as the creator of all things. And this is now drawing a complete connection as the creator in Genesis 1:1. In other words, the word is the God who in the beginning created the heavens and the earth. Interesting enough, I mentioned the Targums earlier in our discussion. So let's quickly look at Targum Neophiti of Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, and it renders this. And again, this is how the Jews would have understood how the Jews would have understood Genesis 1:1 based on the Aramaic commentaries that we know as the Targums. Here is Targum Neophiti, and it says, from the beginning, with wisdom, the memra of the Lord, or the memra of Yahweh created and perfected the heavens and the earth. From the beginning, with wisdom, the memra of Yahweh, or the memra of the Lord, created and perfected the heavens and the earth. So John chapter 1 verses 1 to 3 presents the word as God the creator in Genesis chapter 1 verse 1. And might I add again, I don't think I went through this thoroughly in the very first verse of John chapter 1 verse 1. The word is not by himself. The word is there with Yahweh, which we will soon come to know as the Father. But let's go back to, just to stay on course. I'm almost done. So the first thing that we want to take note of is the fact that the word, according to John chapter 1 verses 1 to 3, is the creator, or the God who created the heavens and the earth in Genesis chapter 1 verse 1. And then number two, the second thing I want you to take note of is that in John chapter 1 to 3, everything was brought into being or existence by the word. The Greek uses the word genomai in regards to creation. In other words, creation came into being, in contrast to the word who continually existed from the beginning or before the beginning. This makes the word Yahweh. This makes the word Yahweh. Perfect. This makes the word, the logos, Yahweh, because Yahweh, as we stated earlier, is the one who exists and cannot be defined by existence, and yet brings all things or things into existence. So, going back to John chapter 1, verse 1, right? In the beginning was the Word. The word was with God, or the word was with Yahweh, the God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God of Israel, the God who created the heavens and the earth. The word was with the God, right? This is a face-to-face interaction, an interfacing, a facing toward. The word faced toward Yahweh in the beginning, before the beginning. The word existed face to face with Yahweh, right? So we have two distinct subjects in John chapter 1, verse 1, A and B clause. And then in the C clause, the writer John is also emphasizing that the word who was face to face with Yahweh is also Yahweh. And so in John chapter 1, 3, is simply saying that the word is eternally relational to the Father. That's all he did was in eternity was he was facing towards the Father, gazing upon the Father's face. The Father was looking at him, he was looking at the Father. There was a relationship that was there that took place before eternity. Took place before time began, took place in eternity. This is the relationship. The word was with God, facing toward the God, facing towards Yahweh, admiring, loving one another. There's a relationship that is there between the word and Yahweh. Yahweh being the Father, the Word being the Son and the Father having a face-to-face relationship, an intimate fellowship, right? Um, and and that's what that's what's bringing out the fact that the Word is eternally relational to the Father. And what I want you to also know is that the Word is relational to His creation, even in the context of our existence in the realm of space, time, and matter. And we know Him. We know the Word as Jesus Christ. Isn't that beautiful? That we know the Word as Jesus Christ. The Word is eternally relational to the Father and is relational to His creation, even in our context of even in the context of our existence. Space, time, and matter, and we know Him as Jesus Christ. In John chapter 1, verse 14, let me go there real quick. Let me see if I can get you there. John chapter 1, verse 14. The Word became flesh and made His dwelling among us. We have seen His glory, the glory of the one and only Son, right? The Word became flesh. We saw His glory, the glory of the one and only Son, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. So He eternally existed with the Father before the beginning, having a face-to-face, intimate, deep fellowship with the Father. And then He comes from the Father, and then He comes to us. And we're able to see the Son. We're able to touch the Son, have relationship with the Son. He came from the Father, the glory of the one and only Son, full of grace and truth. Let's check out John chapter 1, verse 17, right? Which goes on to say, for the law was given through Moses, grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. And then we're going to finish it off with verse 18, because this is all connected to everything that we just read. And it says this. My mouse is like all over the place, like stay one place. It says this: no one has ever seen God but the one and only Son. Remember that? Who is Himself God, who is Himself Yahweh, as we discussed earlier, and is in closest relationship with the Father, has made Him known. So what is the Son doing? The one who has spent time with the Father, who has been in the Father's presence, has come to show us the Father. How do we know that? Look at what look at what Jesus Himself says in John chapter 6, verse 46. And I'll probably close with this one. John chapter 6, verse 46. Check out what Jesus said. This is what Jesus said. This is his very own words. He says that no one has seen the Father except the one who is from God, the one who is from Yahweh. Only he has seen the Father. Jesus has seen the Father, and yet Jesus is bringing the full revelation of the Father to us. Why? Because Jesus is the Word, and he's bringing the full revelation of the Father to us. That's his mission, is to bring to us the full revelation of the Father. So we can completely experience the Father through the Son Jesus Christ. And the Holy Spirit dwells within us, helping us to rightly see the Son so that we can rightly see the Father. Amen. That concludes the curious case of the Logos, the curious case of the Logos, the Word. I hope that, and I know that I was kind of like all over the place, but I hope that you enjoyed it, and that this has helped you. And if anything, I look forward to seeing you on the next subject, on our next presentation. God bless, and you have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day. Peace.